Just a few business items before we start. If you have items in the drawers there, you've got to clean them out because they're going to clean them out. This is for everybody. Wherever your committee is, you need to clean out the drawers. If you have stuff in the downstairs lockers, the same. They're going to be cleaning them out very soon. Also, if you're a prime sponsor of a bill, don't forget to show up in the Senate. I know it can be painful, but try it anyway. Because there have been bills that have come over from the House to the Senate, and the prime sponsor wasn't there, nor was there a substitute. And the Senate looked at it and said, well, if it isn't so important that they're going to come and testify, it's not important to us. And some good bills have been lost. So make sure you get over there. Also, this committee has no bills coming up on Thursday. No bills on the regular calendar, which we rarely do, but even no bills on consent. So we can just sit back and laugh and have a good time and not worry. Yes?
We'll have one bill coming off.
From us? Is this, it's
Reconsideration.
That can be coming up.
when?
Consideration.
This
Oh, okay, yes.
Thursday?
Yes.
I don't,
Yes, it will be on.
I don't see that in the calendar. That doesn't mean it's not here. It just means I don't see it. Where would I find it?
It won't be in the
Yeah, it won't be in
calendar.
the calendar. It's a motion to reconsider.
Okay, a motion to reconsider 23, which is about what? I wasn't here last week for the first time in 9 years, so what was it about?
Criminalizing, expanding the definition of criminal activity.
Oh, yeah, that came out of here unanimously.
It did.
Yeah, please.
So there was obviously a strong misunderstanding as to what the statute did and in legislation, what things look like when it's a criminal statute versus a civil statute. And so it was unfortunately upended on false information. So that was disappointing. I think that, you know, after listening to our committee talk about how we want due process for parents, and how we want teachers accountable, anybody that harms, abuse, or abuses children accountable. That was a disappointing turn. I think that one thing I would like for everyone to know, because I don't think that it was maybe articulated well, but this is a criminal statute. You don't want to start bringing in recreational things and saying, well, except, you know, football or this or that. Those things would never be considered under what this bill was because they're not criminal. When you start to then bring in other things and say except, then you have a problem because now you have introduced these as a possibility. So any recreational activity you don't list, now that you've put them in this criminal statute, you have a huge problem. This was literally just about criminal conduct. Nowhere ever have we had recreational activities or normal parenting decisions in criminal conduct. We're talking about things like leaving a 2-year-old in what's known to be a crack house, or, you know, something that is egregious. Also due process, that does not pose a problem on this, because when you allow, so say a parent is accused, they have done a criminal activity, they've left their child in a drug house, their child maybe ingested fentanyl, that's now a criminal behavior. Right now, that's under a misdemeanor. So what we were trying to do was expand that to a felony so that it matches the egregious nature of what happened. However, they still have their right to due process. Parents, when they are accused under this, even if we have this new amendment happen, are afforded a lawyer. This is not an extra cost to them. This is the full due process of the law with a lawyer provided because it is now in criminal court. This is also something that cannot be weaponized in divorce court because that is civil court. So this is a criminal statute, not a civil statute. Most parental abuse cases happened under civil statute because we understand that parents make mistakes. These are really the egregious cases that we have seen, like with Adam Montgomery. We have seen with these horrible, horrible situations where the police are testifying, you know, these people are getting misdemeanor slap on the wrist. That's a problem. So there was apparently a misunderstanding and it was completely upended, which is unfortunate. That's my long way of explaining
Okay,
it.
thank
So,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay. This is, today is an exec session. No bill is being heard. The bills we are going to be looking at and execing have already had their hearings. That's why you see no pink sign-up cards over there. With that, Children and Family Law for, what's today, 6th? Yeah, for today, May 6th, opening the executive session on Senate Bill 72, and the chair recognizes Representative Raymond for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we consider amendment 2025-1530H.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do I need to make an OTP motion for the amendment? In order
Yes,
for us to talk?
you need
Okay,
to
so
make-
my motion is that we OTP amendment 1530H.
Okay, Representative Raymond, OTP. Do we have a second? And that is Representative Gregg. And now you can speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. What I did with SB 72 was I took a look at the bill as it was presented. Oh, I'm sorry. How's that? Is that better? Usually I have a very loud voice and people can hear me, but today I'm not so loud. So I made a couple of small adjustments to SB 72 that I think if we can agree to, this is one that we could get consensus, bipartisan consensus on passing. So there's two main issues I have with the bill. The first is under I, where it talks about the school withholding information. I agree completely that the school should never withhold information about the child's health, their schooling, and their in-school behavior. However, I think that the information that teachers report to parents ought to be about the child at school, and the teachers should not be surveillance operatives for parents. And I'm thinking about the difference between what a 7-year-old's parents need and a 17-year-old's parents need. So for example, if a 7-year-old's parent calls the school and wants to know how that child is interacting with other students, if there's any issues, that's perfectly reasonable. But if a 17-year-old child's parent calls the school and wants to know, is my child gay? Is my child dating this person that I don't like? Did my child wear a t-shirt that I wasn't aware of? These are questions that probably are private family matters that the school ought to not be in the middle of. I think it's okay for the teacher to say, yeah, I'm concerned about some of the company your child is keeping because we're seeing behaviors that are concerning and impacting their behavior code at the school or the academic progress of your child. It's entirely different to force a teacher to out a student who may not be ready to come out at home. And it really opens the doors for abuse or neglect situations. And our job, I think, is to protect the safety of children. And that includes acknowledging that adolescents have different needs than elementary school students. The other part that I made an edit to is under the Parents' Bills of Rights of Education section, item 3, compelling state interest. I just struck clear and convincing. Clear and convincing is the standard of proof needed to terminate a parent's rights. Teachers will never have that standard of proof. And if we're asking them to have clear and convincing evidence, that is well beyond calling DCYF. That is well beyond a finding of abuse or neglect and an opening of a service case. And it is to the level of evidence required to terminate a parent's rights. No teacher will ever have that amount of evidence against someone. If we just say evidence, it makes it clear that the teacher must have some reason. They ought to be able to document that reason, but it doesn't have to be enough to terminate the parent's rights. It's insane. And frankly, this is consistent across all 50 states. The standard for calling DCYF because a teacher is concerned, and in this case saying, I'm worried if I tell the parent XYZ, like that this child is gay, that the parent will harm them or kick them out. The standard for calling DCYF is a reasonable cause to suspect. The standard in criminal cases for calling the police is also a reasonable cause to suspect. And the standard to arrest someone is just to have is to have a reasonable belief. I forget now the thing, but it's less than clear and convincing. So if we're saying that a teacher needs more evidence than a police officer does to make an arrest, just to say, I would rather call DCYF or the police, that's crazy. So I've changed it to just evidence. You have to have something, but it doesn't have to be that high. I'm happy to, discuss making it some other civil level of evidence, but clear and convincing is outrageous. And then the other part that I changed was I just fixed the grammar. So sometimes it says a child, sometimes it says a parent's child, sometimes it says a parent's minor child, sometimes it says a student. I just changed all of that to their child consistently. So there's one term, we know that this is talking about a parent's rights over their own child. Other than that, I think and I can speak for my caucus, completely agree with the entire list under 189B3 parental rights. The whole list that is in this version, which is the same list that is in the original version, is reasonable and appropriate. And we agree that these are rights that parents have and should have in schools. So those are the two changes, plus the grammar and the legal reasons why. I am concerned that if we don't make these reasonable changes, that the state will be the subject of lawsuits. We've already seen parents suing over wanting to have their child outed at school, and the Supreme Court of New Hampshire saying, no, the school is not the appropriate venue to get in the middle of this private family matter. There are at least 8 other places you can get this information. You can't sue the school over it. And I'm concerned that we are deliberately violating a Supreme Court decision that just came down 5 months ago.
Thank you very much, Representative Raymond. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would a teacher be compelled to tell a parent of a mental illness? Exhibit if a student was exhibiting, ways of being mentally ill.
Yes. Yeah, under current state law and under my amendment, they absolutely would, because it says the child's health, the child's school environment, or the child's school behavior. So if the parent, if the teacher had observed the child behaving in a way that made them concerned about their mental health, if the child had expressed that they have mental health problems, that they wanted to harm themselves or others, that is 100% information that a teacher should and usually already is disclosing to a parent. But if a parent called and asked, they would absolutely, under my amendment, have to disclose that information to the parent.
Could you show us what page and line that would be found on?
Sure. That is on page, hold on. It's under the first section, under Declaration of Purpose. Yeah, hold on. Line 6, 7. So line 6 says, in order to meaningfully and effectively exercise this right, no educational institution may withhold information about a child, the child's health, the child's school environment, or the child's in-school behavior within the context of the school's educational mission and the student's code of conduct from the parents.
Oh, okay. Starts over here.
Representative Gregg was next.
Yes, I just wanted to thank my colleague for this very thorough list of parental rights. I think that one thing that we have heard is the necessity for having parental rights listed in one particular area. We are all certainly for parental rights. I think this not only is a great declaration of putting them all in one place so that parents can see them, but honoring the constitutional rights that parents have and that children have. I think this strikes a nice balance, and I am happy to pass this.
Representative Grund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I just wanted to clarify from what Representative Raymond said is that schools don't diagnose mental illness. They can suggest to a parent that you need to go get testing. That's a very, very clear difference.
Yes, thank you. I agree with that.
Representative Love.
Yes, I'd like to do a little follow-up. Because suicide rates are so high with gender dysphoria, and I don't know if it's been changed, but for decades, the American Medical Association termed gender dysphoria a mental illness. Does that get included in this? Does a teacher have a right to not?
So So
Not-
as Representative Grund just pointed out, teachers don't diagnose illnesses. They don't have the requisite background or experience. I can tell you that gender dysphoria has been in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that psychiatrists and psychologists use since 1981. And the criteria for the diagnosis is that other people's treatment of the person is the disorder, not the person's own feelings about gender dysphoria. So it's really interesting, and that's something that's really misunderstood in the common discussion of this. However, again, teachers can't diagnose. So that is not something that falls within whether the child is following the student behavior code of conduct, the child is asking for help, or the child is suffering academically. If any of those things were in place, then absolutely this would say you have to tell the parent. But as far as gender dysphoria, no. If the child says, that, I've changed my nickname, like in my case, my daughter's name is Gabrielle. She doesn't go by Gabby, she goes by Bree. If a teacher wanted to, tell me that she changed her name, that's kind of weird and ridiculous. And I don't think that this amendment would stop that practice of a teacher telling or compel a teacher to tell me.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So under this, it'd be okay for a teacher not saying, "Hey, there's something serious going on. This what I think is going on is has a propensity for suicide that's real high." This is a problem I've got. If there's something that's going on with a child that they have a high propensity towards suicide, I want to know. As a parent, I want to know.
So I would
help me, please. What I'm saying.
Right. I would say that if a teacher felt that a child was suicidal, this would require them to tell the parent. It would also, frankly, under other codes of conduct for teachers, they would be required to tell someone else in the school, like the school psychologist or the principal, so that that person would then be in charge of figuring out how to contact the parents and get them involved while the math teacher focuses on math. But this would not require a teacher to make any kind of diagnosis or guess at what parents know and don't know. It would not require a teacher to reach out to a parent and ask if a child was already in counseling, because that's none of the teacher's business. It merely requires the teacher to tell the parent if there is a health concern, including a mental illness concern.
One follow up?
One
more
follow-up, yeah. So would the school administration be compelled to tell the parent?
If let's hypothetical, if we have a 16-year-old child who says, I want to use they, them pronouns, no, it wouldn't. It would be just like a child asking for a nickname, which is a normal part of human development. There is no evidence anywhere that suggests that changing pronouns or being gay or being trans is linked to suicidal ideation in schools, right? So that is something, again, that the Supreme Court just said in October, that if parents are concerned about these things, the appropriate venue is to seek mental health treatment for their child, not go to their algebra teacher. And that's just common sense.
Representative Georges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want a little bit, because that the problem when I was in the school boards, I was 4 years I was working I was in a committee for student conduct, but there is a lot of things. Sometimes we're gonna call the teacher, we're gonna call the parent, but the teacher can say the behavior of the children of a student, but sometimes parent to cover himself. The parent can cover, no, my child does not do this, but there is some behavior the kids doing out of their house in a school or what. The teacher can know about that, or parent doesn't know about that. I think so. This just for this point, we need to put more parent what the parent's supposed to do when she saw there is something change for a child. Is a parent to bring the child to mental health, to counseling, to the doctor, to know what is going on with the child. That is very important. Then to put it to the teacher. I think so. That's what I can say.
Representative Petrino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a huge difference between a student who wants to be addressed with certain pronouns or a nickname, as opposed to a student who is expressing self-harm. There is a huge difference. And if a student is expressing self-harm, that needs to be reported. If a student at school who is John at home but is being called Joan at school, parents who are involved parents would know that if they are going to sporting events and other school events and having the children's friends over the house, there are many, many ways of parents finding out without forcing teachers to violate confidentiality as trusted adults. So, you know, asking whether or not my child is gay does not rise to the same level as, do you have evidence that my child is going to self-harm? So in every instance, you have to balance the situation accordingly. And yes, in every single instance, if a teacher believes a child is going to self-harm, they have to report that. All other factors are irrelevant.
Representative Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also, to piggyback on that, I appreciate my colleague's comments. One of our greatest privileges as parents and one of our greatest rights is to have a relationship with our child, to build a relationship with our child and have those conversations with the child. That is nothing that a school can ever dictate or diminish. And something that we cannot legislate is to be a better parent. That's just not there. I would encourage all parents to have open communication with their children and have their children be able to tell them things and be involved in their children's life. That is a right you can't quantify and you can't really put on paper. So,
Representative Corzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a big problem with this amendment only in that first context where it says that the context of the school's educational mission and students' code of conduct, because that leaves out a whole nother world that child's experiencing. And that, frankly, parents have a right to know. I know that this specific piece of legislation in many other states, everybody wants to pigeonhole it just to the transgender movement. But this is far beyond that at this point within our public schools. In 2021 in New Jersey, a 14-year-old student was being bullied in school, but their parents were never notified. And after one such incident, that child took his life. The parents didn't even know that child was being bullied. In 2023, a student was actually raped in the bathroom of their school. The principal conducted an internal investigation, closed the case, all without even notifying the victim's parents. This issue of parental rights goes far beyond any gender ideology. This boils down to the parents have the basic right to know what happens in the life of their child when they're forced to go to a public school system. Also, in regards to Representative Petrino saying that teachers shouldn't breach that confidentiality, as far as I know, teachers are paid by the taxpayers. Teachers are paid by the parents. Teachers don't have a right to confidentiality with those students. The students are cared for by the parent. The parent needs to know what's happening in the life of that child. I mean, I can go on and on because I actually have 20 different things listed here under that. Drug overdoses where the school knew that the child was hanging around the, bad type of kids and they're doing pot and they're doing this and that. The school never informed the parents. And when that child ended up in the ER because they overdosed, it was a complete shock. If public schools are going to ask that the public trust what they're doing with their child, they have a right to know what's happening.
Mr. Chairman?
Can I respond to the questions that she asked about the amendment?
Yes, you may. Representative Raymond as prime and then Representative Petrino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So regarding the first one that you mentioned about bullying, so under page 3, line 18. It was also in the section we were just parting about. The right to receive truthful and accurate information about their child within the context of the school's education mission and student code of conduct. So that covers bullying. Every single district in the state is required by state law to have a policy that covers bullying. It's also in the student code of conduct. So if a child is being bullied, the school, under both this new statute and the laws of New Hampshire, have a requirement to share that information with the parent. Regarding a sexual assault on campus, under page 2, line 27, L, it says the right to be promptly notified if a criminal offense has been committed against their minor child. The school does not have the right to do their own investigation. Under this amendment and the original bill and current state law, schools in New Hampshire must contact the police and the parent immediately if they suspect that a criminal offense has happened. That also goes for drug use in school. If a child is caught in New Hampshire, we also have policies on vaping, e-cigarettes, and drugs. If the school catches the child with a group of kids using those things, possessing those things, they must immediately notify the parents. There is no exception to that. So I don't know what's happened in New Jersey, but in New Hampshire, under both my amendment and current state law, all of those things are required to be reported to the parent. The only thing that the original bill opens the door for is outing gay and trans students. That's it. There's no other circumstance that this bill hits except for forcing 16 and 17-year-olds who want to stay in the closet at home to be outed to their parents, even if the child has said that my parent is going to abuse me or kick me out, which we know happens to over 40% of these kids.
Representative Petrino and then Representative Corzine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Raymond. You articulated that very well. And Representative Corzine, I'll have to say that I agree with you in terms of the examples that you gave. Definitely parents need to know all of those things. The legislation before us specifically is about parental inquiry, whether or not a parent has a right to inquire. If schools have been negligent in not reporting things that they should, shame on them for doing so. Okay. But when we talk about the school setting, it's not just about the academics. It's about vaping in the bathroom, whether or not there's an altercation in the hallway, whether or not students are using profanity in the classroom. Lots and lots and lots of behavior that takes place in school. All of that is covered. But if a child has parents that for whatever reason they cannot trust, there are unfortunately some dysfunctional homes, and there are some children who have no adult at home that they can confide in. They need to go somewhere, and very often it is a trusted adult at school. And that is why our Department of Education has the One Trusted Adult program. Because if you have a child who cannot talk to mom or dad for whatever reason, and now they know that they can't talk to their teacher at school because if mom and dad asks a question, the teacher is going to have to violate that confidentiality. The child is not going to talk to the teacher. They're not talking to mom and dad. And so what ends up happening? They are isolated. They are desperate. And then there's the potential for self-harm. And that is what upsets me most about this piece of legislation, because we are putting children in harm's way. Undoubtedly. And sadly, there are parents who are dysfunctional, and children need to be able to go someplace. We need good parents. We need good teachers. Sadly, there are some bad teachers and there are some bad parents. The bottom line is we need to protect children, and that's what this is all about.
Representative Corzine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who among us at one point or another hasn't thought or said, man, if my parents find out this, they're going to kill me? I mean, who hasn't said that? Who hasn't really thought that? I think all kids at one point say, oh, I got to hide this from my parents. I was the daughter of a pastor. There was extra pressure on me. to fill the roles or whatnot. I remember being caught doing something I should not have been doing at a young age. I was probably 14, 15, and I was caught. Let me just say, I did not inhale. But, the person who caught me, he didn't say, "Oh yeah, you're right. Your parents would kill you if they found out." He didn't sit me down and say, "Wow, that is awful." He sat me down and said, why are you doing this? He then said, "We need to tell your parents about this." And I begged and I pleaded, "Do not tell them, they will kill me. They will kill me. My dad's a pastor, you don't understand." What happened when we finally sat down and talked? My parents understood. My parents, and I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, your parents are not all parents. But the problem is, we have to give the parents the benefit of the doubt. I think instead of schools hiding this from parents or keeping it hidden in the shadows where it grows into a deeper, darker, evil thing, we need to bring it to the light. Help these kids explain to the parents what they're thinking. Schools should be helping to teach kids how to communicate, even the stuff that's hard.
As I think some of you know, we had a special committee on the family court for 2 years, and we have a subcommittee this time. And I was given the rules of evidence, which I memorized, basically. And in the 500 series of the rules of evidence, the question of confidentiality of speech comes up. And there is a section for lawyer and client, counselor and client, doctor and patient, clergy, hopefully not killer pastors, clergy and penitent, as enumerated under confidential speech. Teachers are not listed there. Whether they should be or not is an open question, but they're not. So to assume that there is the confidentiality of teachers is an assertion, but I do not believe it is either a law or even a statute. So just want to say that when the confidentiality of communication between teacher and student is asserted, it is not listed in rules of evidence. It's not of that level, in my opinion. Representative Raymond for the rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my issue is not actually about confidentiality. I tend to agree with the rules of evidence that there is no confidentiality there, right? My issue is with, again, with Rep. Corzen's example. That example is covered in here, that is something that a teacher must disclose. However, adolescence is a time of coming into oneself, and not everything that teenagers feel and think and are is the business of everybody in the world, right? And not everything that teenagers are experiencing and doing is the business of their algebra teacher either. Coming out is a personal decision that each person has to make for themselves when and how to tell their family that they are gay or bi or transgender. It is an individual decision, and it is not the business of a school, any person in the school, to make that decision for any individual. It's not the business of the state legislature to decide when and how someone comes out to their family. It's just not. This is not a behavior. We're not talking about someone having sex at school. That's something that if they do have sex at school, they need to report that to the parent because that violates the school code of conduct. But if they just exist as a gay or bi or trans person at 15, 16, 17 years old, that's nobody's business. It just isn't. It's their decision when and how they come out to their family. It has always been the individual's decision on when and how to come out to their family. If they're not acting in a way that puts their safety or well-being or academics or violates the code of conduct, then teachers need to mind their business and parents need to choose appropriate venues to have these family conversations. And it is not with the math teacher or the Spanish teacher. It is with a psychological provider. It is with a clergy person. It is around their own kitchen table. It's not in the school.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have a two
Part. Question.
two different subjects.
Okay, let's start with one.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add that schools are not a bubble, and when you've outed yourself as a student to your entire school community, you've outed yourself to the entire community. And I know this because I've had children, and there was one particular time where my daughter came home and revealed that a friend of hers had come out as trans, and that person was dressing in the clothing that they felt most comfortable with. And she asked me what she should do. I said, just be a good friend because your friend's going to need it, you know? So I guess my point is that kids talk to their parents, and a secret might be kept from a family that the entire community knows about. So I just wanted to make that statement. And then if I may ask my question.
Was this the first question?
Yeah,
or
it
the
was
second
it,
question?
but this is the
This is the
second.
second question.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
This is completely different subject, but I noticed that, and I could be wrong just because I'm trying to compare. I noticed that in your amendment, if you could just point me to it, I don't see section D, line 1 on page 3 in the Pearson, DeSimone, Markel amendment. It has to enroll his or her minor child in gifted or special education programs if the child qualifies for such programs, but I didn't see that in your amendment.
Well, darn, I think did it get dropped?
I'm sorry.
I know we haven't talked about that amendment, but
You cannot talk about the other
But the
amendment. You
right
can
to-
talk about the concept and why the concept perhaps isn't here.
right, there is no reason why the concept is not here.
Okay,
That
one at a
should be
time,
there.
folks. Representative Raymond?
I'm sorry, that there's no reason why the concept of that is not here. If it was in the original bill, it should be in the amendment because the only two changes should have been the level of thing. Having said that, I'm looking at the original bill to see if perhaps it wasn't in the original bill, so that's why it didn't get in there, or if it was just an error. And I don't see it in the original bill, so that would be why.
Okay, just for the record here, we cannot discuss the contents of the other amendment you have in hand. However, that can inform you in asking a question about what's in or out of the amendment we're looking at. Representative Nelson?
I apologize about that
all right.
to you and to the committee. I'm sorry.
No, but you're absolutely correct. That is a right that parents have under state law and federal law and should be continued. I don't know why it's not in the original bill or the amendment.
Representative Petrino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've looked at a number of different amendments to House Bill 10 and Senate Bill 72, and in many instances, there are rights that exist in statute that aren't included in the legislation before us. And so it does have a clause that the rights of a parent regarding his or her child or children included but are not limited to the following. So that covers whatever is in statute that we forgot to put in the amendment. So we're good.
Okay, anything else on this amendment? Representative Lavec?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did just want to say, like, I wasn't I never worked at a school, but I did work as a camp counselor for many years since I was 15 years old. And I had anywhere between the ages of, I want to say, 5 to 17, 18 years old. And a lot of the kids there know me as like one name, and we had to use different nicknames as camp counselors so they wouldn't know our names and everything. And so a lot of the kids were like, oh, I want to have a cool nickname like you. So they would have different nicknames. We write them on the boards that we have of their names and everything. And I thought that was really sweet because they wanted to be like us, like the camp counselors. They wanted to be camp counselors. I've had many campers that were like, oh, I want a cool nickname like you. I want to be called this. I want to be called like, I don't know, like Fluttershy or something, or like My Little Pony, or like a cool character. And I thought that was really sweet that they wanted that. I would get pictures of all of us together with all the nicknames and everything. And when I went to school, I was told my name's too long. I needed a nickname for the teachers. So I would be, instead of Cassandra, I would be called by Cassie. Luckily, my parents had that nickname. But the school wanted me to have a nickname. They told my parents that I had to have a nickname because my name was too long for them to pronounce. So I think that, having that nickname as a kid is something that's personal for them. I think that is them finding themselves and making the experience personal for them. And I don't think that anybody should be like, oh, hey, we're calling your kid like this, unless it has anything to do with their academic performance or their mental health issues or anything like that, because that's personalizing the experience for them. They're making them more comfortable in their environment. They may go by a nickname with their friends, by other peers, by the teachers, whatever. And I don't think that is anything to do with their academic prowess, how they're doing in their classrooms, how they're behaving or anything, unless it becomes a problem. Like if their friends are bursting out and just calling each other by their nickname, disrupting the classroom, things like that. I don't think that if a parent inquires about that and has a question about that, the teachers have a right to say, you need to go ask your kid about that. That is a personal thing that I can't talk to you about unless it has anything to do with that. And then that should open the discussion for the parent and be able to have that discussion. I think I was lucky enough to have an open household to where we can talk about things at the kitchen table. And there are a lot of kids that don't have that. And we need to understand that there are some kids that need that one trusted adult to say, I want to go by, instead of John, I want to be called Joan, because that's how I feel. But my parents would hate that because they don't like or support that community. And I'm just trying this out. And I want to try and see and experience multiple things and personalize my experience and see what I want to do.
Thank you. Representative Corzine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect, there's a huge difference between wanting to use a nickname and wanting to go by another gender. I think that's kind of obvious. There's a big difference there. The other thing I wanted to say is, in researching this amendment and, HB 10 and everything else, I looked up other states where they have parental rights bills. I looked into, some of the bills, Florida's bill is much broader and expansive. Others, they just hit the tip of the iceberg, but they do the job. But in every single one of those states, there has been no rise in abuse or neglect or anything like that. I think sometimes we want to see this as the parents are bad, parents won't understand. And you're almost feeding the fear. But rest assured that in every state where they have a parental bill of rights, there has been no uptick in abuse or neglect for these reasons at all.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. LGBTQ issues, sexual issues, alcohol and drug issues, mental illness issues. The kid might be out stealing cars, and if a teacher comes across all this information, the parental bill of rights for me is, you know, that they should be as a somewhat partner in raising kids. And let's face it, teachers do help, but we can't forget, you know, there's a hierarchy here. You know, the parents are there for the long haul. Teachers are no more than a visitor in these kids' lives. You know, I know, you know, my daughter's 25 years old. She remembers all her teachers. A lot of them don't remember her. I visited school a lot. They don't remember me, you know, and, you know, there were issues there that I should have been made aware of at the time. This was quite a while ago, but they weren't, because we have to hide this stuff from parents. You know, I think it's the worst thing in the world we can do. You know, my daughter was put on Adderall. Okay, Adderall turned into a 10-year crack run. Okay, that you want to go through hell? Have a kid on crack. Okay, if I was informed that at sixth and seventh grade that these kids were crushing them up and snorting them, you know, maybe just maybe, but the teachers didn't do it. They knew they had a bunch of kids that were running around out of control, and you know, it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. And nobody was ever told. You know, I think teachers have to be held accountable. I mean, if I know, if your daughter's hanging around with my daughter, and you know, and they're 14 years old, and I come across the idea that, you know, these kids are taking drugs, you bet I'm making a phone call to you. The teacher should be no different. No, they're not.
Representative Malone.
Thank you, Chairman. So huge difference in reported abuse and what's actually happening. I have been in foster care, and I have been a foster parent. I was raised very religious, and yeah, I remember when my sister got caught smoking, she thought my dad would kill her. He made her smoke a pack of Pall Mall back to back and then chug it down and inhale with a cigar. She did not die, but she puked for 3 days. That's how we handled those things. After my dad died and I went into foster care, I met a lot of young people who, when they said my parents will kill me, it was actually true. I have met many kids that I thought were exaggerating, or that I thought I had a bad life because I ended up in foster care and homeless after my dad died. You don't have a clue. And then I became an adult and I started taking kids in. And I just had one leave my home at 18 years old after choosing to be with us those times. I understand good parents, and they're probably all in here. You do not understand the depravity of the mind of a parent who does not have the skills that we do at this table. I promise you, and it's one of the reasons I even ran, is because children are getting outed. I worked in homeless youth services for 12 to 24-year-olds at Waypoint. We see them come and advocate for these children all the time. I assure you that most of their parents' inquiries with the school and the guidance counselors were not to be protective of them. If that was true, trans and LGBTQ kids would not represent the homeless population. They are overrepresented in the homeless population, which, guess what that means? The teachers did not make these children homeless. Their parents did. And I really encourage you to start looking more at the incredibly vulnerable population that you continue to pigeonhole in some of these bills, thinking that the parents with the best interest of their children are getting involved in this. I'm sorry if whatever school your daughter went to or stepdaughter didn't say. I can assure you, where we went to school, if you were crushing up Adderall and snorting it in school, your parents got told. They still do to this day. I've been a PTA member. I've been on school board. I've sat in discipline committee after discipline committee. the children that are asking for these things to not be referred out to their familial family are for a reason. And you can pass this and you can think that we have protected parental rights somehow, but I will promise you that this is a mistake we don't want to make, because those children are real. They are real. They are overrepresented, not just in mental health and suicide, but in homeless. And those are the reasons. They're also the most likely to be victimized, to be bullied. Trans men are killed more in this country. Black trans men are killed more in this country than any other population. Think about what you're actually really doing and stop. And we need to not sugarcoat it with other things. I've always been able to get any and everything I wanted from both of my children, all of my foster children, and the nieces and nephews that lived with me when my family struggled with drug addiction. Schools are doing a really good job. We ask them to feed them, to help clothe them, to keep them in after school programs. We ask teachers to do a lot, more so than the parents. And we want to hold parents responsible. They get them 6 hours a day. I don't know about you, but I had the kids the rest of those hours. I still get my kids more than any teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Malone. I think we have pretty well staked out two different opinions here, and we could go on all day by repeating the same thing, but I'd like to wrap this up. We have other things to do today, and if somebody really wants to say something, especially if he or she hasn't said anything, that's fine, but Representative Georges?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think so. I want to just if there is a way parent is responsible for their children. Like everybody, like you said, all of us we say here, I've been here from elementary to high school. Everybody knows who I am. Because why? I always follow my kids. And the school gonna tell my kids, we're gonna call your mom. They cannot say call dad. Even they say maybe call daddy, but mom, that's why. Because I always follow and I know what's gone. But I think so the teacher, we cannot put in the teacher because this is really, we're going to put them in trouble for no reason. The teacher, they are not the parent for the kids. Maybe the kid, a child can tell the parent, the teacher, or he cannot tell the teacher. But we're going to assume we told the teacher know what's gone. But sometimes the teacher doesn't know what's gone. But kids know, because my daughter brought me a lot of problem for the kids in school. And I helped those kids as a minister. And I was in my house sometime. Friday, they're going to come for sleepover, and I'm going to tell them, you come here for sleepover on Saturday. Sunday, you're going to go to the church. Why? Because and your parent come pick you up at the church. That's what I was doing for a lot of kids. But the teachers said sometimes they don't even know what's going on with the kids. But between kids, they know each other. Friend maybe can tell a parent. If a parent know a friend, but now let us put it to the teacher. I feel those teachers they become a problem. Because most of the parents going to put the teacher in problem, and especially if they have a problem with that teacher or what, and it's going to try to make it the teacher knows for the child and know this. Please, if there is a way we can help the teacher, please. I just want to for me, I just stand for the teacher. Because this has become the problem from the teacher. The teacher stay with the kids for how many hours? But I stay with my kids for how many hours? We sleep with my kids in my house. My kids know this. But I've been in school, in the school board for student conduct. I see what's going on. Sometimes a teacher gonna say what the child say, what the child do. They're gonna take the child, put him out, now go to school. But over in the house, he doesn't do anything. But he's with the parent. There is a lot of issue, but please, if we can put out the teacher in trouble, please, I just stand for the teacher, please, because that is going to make them in trouble. Thank you.
I think we've pretty well exhausted what everyone needs to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're looking at me, so I'm going to take it as permission. So I just want to wrap up. The motion is to adopt this amendment that Representative Patrigno and Greg and Levesque and Malone and I have written. And this amendment covers every example that was put forth on the table this morning of what we all collectively think that schools need to tell parents. Every single thing that came up, mental health, behaviors that are dangerous, bullying, using drugs, all of those things are covered by this amendment. And I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us to have bipartisan consensus about all of these specific examples that we all agree parents need to know so that they can be proactively involved in their child's school life. So I would encourage everyone to support it.
And let me summarize for perhaps some other folks, without giving the content of it, although you've already read it. There is another amendment that will look at the same issue. The matter before us is 2025-1530, the amendment to Senate Bill 72 FN, moved by Representative Raymond and seconded by Representative Gregg. A yes vote means you wish to adopt this amendment to Senate Bill 72. A no vote means you do not wish to adopt this amendment. Would one of the clerks please call the roll?
Chairman Pearson,
No.
Representative DeSimone,
No.
Representative Harvey Bolya,
No.
Representative McMahon,
No.
Representative Nelson,
No.
Representative Moffett,
No.
Representative Love.
No.
Representative Corzine votes no. Representative Markell,
No.
Representative Petrino,
Yes.
Representative Gregg,
Yes.
Representative Grund,
Yes.
Representative Levesque,
Yes.
Representative Raymond,
Yes.
Representative Georges,
Yes.
and Representative Malone.
Yes.
The motion fails 7-9. Now we have to have a motion that passes, so the chair will entertain the motion of ITL. And who wishes to make that?
I'll move ITL.
ITL Representative DeSimone, second.
I'll second.
Corzine. I really don't think we need to discuss it. The motion before us,
I don't think
What?
we have to.
Yeah, because it's a,
we don't have to do that?
No, because you can just
Not on an
take up
amendment?
the second amendment.
We just take up the second amendment.
Okay. Anybody smarter than me? Yeah, that's most of you. Okay, then we don't.
It's done.
All right, so this amendment fails 7-9, and now the amendment is Amendment 1832, and I'm primed simply because I walked it over, but Representatives DeSimone and Markell are really the very much the genius behind this with a few others. So I will move OTP on House Amendment 2025-1832 to Senate Bill 72. I will move that, and Representative DeSimone.
I'll second.
Okay.
And I'd like to speak to my second.
Yes, and I would ask you please to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee, for listening to me. Although, truth be told, I looked at Representative Raymond's amendment, and for the most part, I agree. The difference between that one and the reason that I'm moving this one is this amendment 2025-1832 is much more comprehensive. You can't hear? Okay. This amendment is much more comprehensive. Is that better? Okay. I've done a lot of work, probably close to 1,000 hours on parental rights bills. children today there's very little difference in children today than they were many years ago. The difference with parents is that more parents are working today than they ever were before, and they need help. They need help to fully raise their children. They need to be able to work as partners with the schools to assist the raising of their children. Nowhere in this Senate Bill Amendment 72 does it discuss children who are members of the LGBTQ community and any other community, because specifically when children hit puberty, puberty is really difficult for all children, if they are members of that community or not. Life is difficult during puberty. Parents and the schools need to work together to help those kids through all those difficulties. In today's society, the other difference is that many kids who are members of that community do join groups because it's an old saying, birds of a feather flock together. They do have a group of kids that they can relate to. They do have a group of kids that they can discuss some of their issues. But that, again, whether they discuss it with their friends or whether they discuss it with an adult, those discussions need to be a part of the discussion of the home life. The vast majority of parents are good, loving, caring parents who both sets of parents are working outside the home, and they don't have the time to spend with their children that they should. That's the nature of today's beast. So if they can work in partnership with the school, and they call the school and say, look, I'm noticing that my child is more sad than he or she usually is. Do you know anything? Here's a huge point. If the teacher doesn't know, the teacher doesn't know. Nobody's asking anybody to report something that they don't have any factual information about. Bottom line, you don't know what you don't know. Nobody in the amendment to Senate Bill 72, nowhere in that amendment does it say that a teacher should be a psychologist and discuss or report psychological issues. Nowhere in that in this amendment does it say that any teacher or staff member of a school should out a child. It says that absolutely nowhere, because a child may, let's say for instance, a male child has very feminine actions. Maybe the child is gay. That's all right. But maybe the child's not. The teacher may assume that that's a gay child, or may say nothing about it. So it's not about any teacher calling a parent on the phone and saying, this is the behavior your child is displaying in school. It's about if the parent who is engaged in their child's upbringing contacts the school and says, I believe there is an issue with my child. Can you help me? Do you know anything? Again, I can't stress it enough. If they don't know, they don't know. We're not expecting a teacher to report anything that they do not factually know. I again applaud the sponsors of the other amendment, but I voted against it only because the amendment before you is much more comprehensive, and it addresses many more issues that can help a parent work as a partner with the school to get these children through the most difficult time of their teenage years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Petrino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, we support parental rights, but we're never going to support legislation that puts children in harm's way. And I do believe that this amendment will, in fact, put children in harm's way. Now, I have heard many, many times that parents are losing their rights. We've all heard that. But yet, to my knowledge, not a single statute, state or federal, has ever been rescinded. In fact, they have been affirmed time and time again in the courts. So if there are any violations of the parental rights which exist, well, that is a matter that needs to be addressed. If a parent feels that their rights have been violated, then by all means, they have a right to contest it. But nowhere have any of the rights that are enumerated here, have they ever been rescinded. Next, we hear, well, we need to have all of these rights in one place so parents will know exactly what their rights are. Well, the Department of Education has already done that for us with their technical advisory, and they advise the parents each year, these are your rights, you should know them. So then, what is the big difference? The big difference is in only one piece, and that is mandatory disclosure. That is really the only difference between our amendment and the amendment we are looking at. Mandatory disclosure. It was in House Bill 10, it's in Senate Bill 72, and there is even a bill, Senate Bill 96, which exclusively deals with just mandatory disclosure and nothing else, because that's all that is asked for. Now, when you have mandatory disclosure and a parent can go and ask a teacher any and all questions, and that's exactly what it says, any and all questions, you know very well that teenagers are going to be like, holy cow, I can't say anything to my teacher for fear that if my parent asks the teacher, I'm going to get in trouble. And so a child is not going to confide in a teacher. They may have dysfunctional parents that they cannot confide in. And those individuals, and we're not talking about just the LGBTQ plus community, which is very real. I am talking about every single kid who, for whatever reason, feels that they cannot confide in mom and dad, and now they know they cannot confide in their teacher, and they have absolutely no place to go. And I have many examples as 40 years as a high school teacher that I can share. I can share of one particular situation where a young lady came to me who was failing my class and she asked for extra help. And so I gave her help one evening, and then the second night. And by the third night, she started to open up, telling me stories about how her mom can't support her because of her mom's mental health illness, and how dad often comes home from work intoxicated. And then mom and dad get into fights that are so bad that she leaves the house and goes to the car to get away from the noise. And sometimes she falls asleep there. I mean, she's opening up to me. I didn't ask to hear all of this information. And then she began to talk about how she has taken some drugs and self-harm. Holy cow, I did not want to hear all of this, but she needed some place to go because she wasn't getting that support from mom and dad back home. What did I do? I referred her to the places where she needed to go and get the help that she needed. If she didn't have me and she didn't have mom and dad, where would she have gone? And so I got her that help. On graduation, her dad, for the very first time I met the guy, came to me, shook my hand, and thanked me for helping his daughter in a time of need. That is just one example that I can give. I give you another example of a student who came to me and confided that dad doesn't love her. Why would you say that? Dad goes to all of my brother's sporting events. He doesn't care about my academic pursuits. I enjoy reading and I enjoy writing. And Dad has told me that it's silly that girls want to go to college. This really hurt her so bad she confided in me. I encouraged her pursuits. You know, and I hear Representative Love when he talks about how, you know, parents have children for a lifetime, teachers only for a moment. Well, that moment can be very, very powerful, because the student that I'm talking about, with her independent study, ended up self-publishing a book that she wrote. And in it, her dedication was to Mr. Petrino. Anyone can believe in you, but it takes a special kind of person to make you believe in yourself. I was that trusted adult for her because her own father would not support her academic interests. I was there to support that student who could not go to mom and dad and started using drugs. And you can see I'm passionate about this because I loved my students. And yes, I don't remember all of their names because I've had thousands of kids, but they remember me because I was there for them. And I am proud that many of my former students have asked me to officiate their weddings. What an honor. What an honor. We will put children in harm's way when they know they have no place to turn. You know, and I didn't always agree with Governor Sununu, but I applaud him for adopting the One Trusted Adult program, which is now in our Department of Education. And if you go to that website and you read it, you will see that the One Trusted Adult program is about having a student going to a teacher that they can just confide in when they have no other place to go. Past this, you kill the One Trusted Adult program. You take away from young people a place to go when they have no other place to go. Thank you. And
Thank
sorry
you.
for the emotion, but you can tell this is very,
You do not
very,
need to
very
apologize for your
important to me.
emotions, sir. Representative DeSimone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your passion, Representative Petrino. There were many times in my life that I too relied on a teacher, and most teachers who are involved with students' lives, I want to believe are like you. I'm a survivor of abuse. My father flatly refused to allow me to get my driver's license because girls are too stupid. He flatly refused to allow me to apply for college because why bother? You're only going to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. However, I did have teachers. I had ministers. And my parents, like most abusive parents, never once called any one of those teachers that I confided in. Never once. Because I was a girl and I was not worth their time. However, I was a worthy person. And luckily, I met my husband when I was 15 years old. A good, honest, strong man. And when I turned 18, my husband and I married. And my husband said to me, you know, I'm graduating college. Do you ever want to think about going to college? I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, when are you going to start? My father said to him, what are you, stupid like her? What are you going to waste your money on her for? I started college. I became a nurse. I had a child who was very sickly and had to spend my emotions at home. I confided in my husband at that point. I was now 20 years old, ready to have my second child. By the time I was 24 years old, I had 3 degrees. Because I left nursing because my child was sickly and I had to spend my emotional time with my child. I have now 3 children, one of whom's ADHD. I spent every single week, I spent at least one day in the school talking to my children's teachers to get my children educated properly. My sickly child is hearing impaired. I have an ADHD child, and I have a child who had above average intelligence. I had to work with the school, and the school worked with me. And without teachers like Representative Petrino that I had and my children had, I don't know where we'd be. But not once did my parents ever call the school. Because, you know, those kids that Representative Petrino had and that I was, the parents just don't care. But the majority of parents do. I cared. My friends care. My children who are now parents care. They do work in conjunction with the schools. The majority of the teachers in every school district are very similar to Representative Petrino and the teachers that I had. I never tried, thank you God, I never tried self-harm, but kids do. And it's the good parents who can help their children through that difficult time. I'm never going to say that no child should not confide in a teacher, although it's really not, and I think Representative Petrino will agree, it's not the teacher's job, but they're human beings and they have hearts and they love children, otherwise they wouldn't be teachers. This is not about the teachers like Representative Petrino. This is not about the teachers like that. It's about the parents who should be calling the schools and being given the information so they can totally, completely, 100% raise their children to be well-rounded, confident adults. And again, I thank you, Representative Petrino, for being the compassionate human being that you are.
Representative Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular line of where we are right now is pretty upsetting to me. And I've made no secret, because I have the ability to talk, that I am a survivor. I am a victim's advocate. I'm also the mother of 3 children who were scared for their life from their father. They each had a trusted adult. At school, that was the most empowering thing they ever had. He was somebody that was calling and trying to get information, and underneath this particular amendment, he would have been compelled to do so. However, rather than get deeper into that personal thing, I actually wrote out my thoughts last night, because there is one fact in here that is a really big problem. So I wrote this out because this is a high emotion thing for me. I did not want to get this wrong, because it's important that we talk about facts when we are talking about the direction of the children in our state. I am deeply disappointed in the direction that we've been heading to in this committee, especially given the most recent things. And I don't say that lightly. I am proud to be on this committee and a member of that. Between recent legislation and budget choices, we're creating a New Hampshire that feels safer and more catering to and for abusers than it does for victims. That should never be the case. Let's talk about what is actually happening. The House just passed a budget that completely eliminates the Title X program. On top of that, Planned Parenthood of Northern New England has not received a dime in the state since April 1st. That means there may be no providers left in New Hampshire who can offer confidential birth control to minors, even if 72 passes with the proposed amendment. Let's be honest, SB 72, especially with the amendment, isn't just about parental rights. It's also about a barrier to birth control for teenagers, especially those in unsafe homes or unstable environments, the ones who need help the most. This is a setup for harm. In states like Texas, where parental consent is required for birth control, teen pregnancy rates are rising rapidly for the first time in decades. We should be learning from those mistakes, not repeating them. We are stripping young people of the ability to protect themselves. we're silencing them. And when we do that, when we prioritize, and I want to underline this so much, when we prioritize ideology or control over safety and care, we're not standing with families, we are standing with abusers. We all value the role of parents. I think all of us are parents, or most of us. Ideally, these decisions are made within supportive families, but policy must also protect those who don't have that support. Forcing parental involvement in every case may sound good in theory, but in practice, it risks driving young people away from care altogether, especially in situations involving abuse, neglect, or fear of retaliation. This is not the New Hampshire that I believe in. We should be protecting kids, not pushing them deeper into silence, secrecy, and harm. I really hope everybody can stop and ask, who are we doing this for? Because if it's not for the kids, what are we even doing right now? I am ashamed with some of the decisions that have come out of this committee.
Representative Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to point out that the biggest differences between this amendment and the prior amendment and the original bill, SB 72, is that it is so much more comprehensive that it has added entirely new sections. It has added sections that make it difficult for teachers and doctors now, because it's added a doctor component that wasn't in the original bill, to call DCYF when they have a concern. It's raised the barrier for calling for help when a doctor or a teacher has heard a child disclose that they might be abused or neglected. It has changed it to say when they believe that the child is a victim of a crime. And we know that 99% of the abuse and neglect cases in New Hampshire and everywhere are not criminally involved. They are civil. So we are effectively telling teachers and doctors, you can only call for help if you think it's a crime. That's crazy. Further, it has a section on page 5, starting on line 27, that my colleague, Representative Gregg, was just referring to, where this bill sneaks in a provision that says that parents have to consent to everything in writing for medical care. Currently, if my child needs a prescription that is a refill, if they need a telehealth appointment, I can do that over the phone or the computer with their provider. This bill would make me have to drive to the office and meet with them. So if you have a child who is doing telehealth with a provider in another state or up at Dartmouth in Lebanon that's 2 hours away, you will no longer be able to access those services if we pass this amendment. And of course, our teenagers who are accessing birth control will no longer be able to do so. They can still go get Plan B off the shelf if they can afford it, but they won't be able to have those confidential discussions with their doctor about safety things during their routine visits without mom or dad coming in and signing that it's okay. This is a huge change for New Hampshire. We have never had this law ever in the history of our state. No one has asked for this law. And in states that have it, like Texas, the teen pregnancy rates are rising. People are dying from pregnancy in those states, and I don't think that that's the direction we want to go in. The other thing I'll say about that is, in cases of teen pregnancy, teens who choose to keep their baby will not have the right, if this passes, to make any medical decisions about their pregnancy for themselves. They will need mom or dad to accompany them to every appointment and sign all of the paperwork. If they need a scan, mom or dad has to sign for it. If during the course of the birth they want to use Pitocin, mom or dad has to sign for that. If they want an epidural, mom or dad has to sign for that. If they need an episiotomy, mom or dad has to sign for it. If they need post-op stitches, mom or dad has to sign for that. And when they go back for their 6-week checkup to talk to the doctor about what's happening to their bodies, mom or dad has to be there and sign for any medical interventions that might happen or any prescriptions. That's crazy. If we have a 17-year-old with a baby who's making all the decisions about the baby, why should grandma get to decide what medications that new mom gets? This is wild. And it was just like snuck in there on page 5 without any discussion until today. My mind is just blown when I read it. It's just absolutely blown.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and respectfully, Representative Raymond. My interpretation is that, when you fill out paperwork as the parent and sign, permission to treat forms, I think that's what this is referring to, because it doesn't say every single time on here, and maybe our vice chair might be able to clarify that a little for us.
Thank you, Representative. Without assuming anything, number one, when you fill out the paperwork to involve your child in the care of a pediatrician, you sign paperwork. If you have a telehealth situation, there are online signatory pages that you can avail yourself of, so you don't have to drive as far as sometimes necessary to seek proper medical care for your child. There are a multitude of ways that you can create that signature with the pediatrician or a specialist. So that's one of the reasons that I don't see a problem with that. In the case of a child who gives birth to a child, we've had discussions frequently in this committee concerning young people getting married and how difficult it is without the parents available to help that child through difficult times. Well, nothing in my estimation is much more, probably equal to, but in my opinion only, much more difficult than going through child labor and giving birth to a child. If a parent is available, the parent should be there to support their child who is becoming a mother. They should have the right. They should be able to assist their child. And we're only talking about children who are not emancipated. We're talking about children who need their parents at a very, very important time in their life. So if that means that the parent can sign for their child or sign once and we're good, that's what the law is going to provide for. Thank you.
Representative Levesque.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have a problem with adding the medical into this because we're talking about teachers and the education. And if we want to have the medical side, I think there should be a separate parental rights bill for medical personnel. It shouldn't be added into this. I think it's a whole separate issue that we're talking about when it comes to the rights between a person and their doctor. And we're getting into that whole mess of what can be consented and what can't be when we're specifically talking about the child and a teacher and the administration of that school. I don't think that we should add the medical portion of it just because I think that's a whole separate issue, whole separate topic that we need to discuss outside of this, because this amendment and this bill mainly focuses on the education purposes and it shouldn't have any of that medical stuff in it. That's a whole separate topic.
Thank you. Anyone who has not spoken just yet? Okay. Question?
I do have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if anyone who supports this amendment can help alleviate my biggest concern. My question is regarding mandatory disclosure. If a child feels that they cannot confide in a teacher because they're afraid that if parent asks, then the teacher's going to have to tell, and that child does not have functioning parents and they can't talk to their parents, I want to know, where does that child go if they can't talk to a teacher and they cannot talk to their parent? That is my biggest concern, and I have not heard that addressed. So anyone here, and I see a couple of hands, so please help me out on this one.
I do know situations where people have confided in me as their pastor under what is confidentiality, which, yeah. And a coach of Little League or something. I'm not trying to diminish what you're saying at all, but I do know numbers of other places where many kids can go.
Coaches would be covered.
Well, it's not a high school coach. This would be a Little League coach in town, say. Or that nice guy or gal down the block that kids gravitate towards. I'm just suggesting that to answer your question, that there are other places where some kids go. Hands, Representative Cozen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer your question, I think that this is all leading up to the breakdown of the family. I think that kids need to be going to their grandparents. I think kids need to be going to their aunts and uncles. These are the traditional places kids went to learn, to communicate, maybe in a more open setting. I know nieces and nephews have always come to me and my husband. I know that now as a grandparent, I do hope that when they're old enough, I can be the bridge between parent and child. I think that we need to realize that grandparents are there, that aunts and uncles are there, that cousins are there. I mean, I grew up in a big Italian family, as did you, and you know how important the larger family is in the life of a child. And I don't think that we should just glance over that.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the problems here we have is, we have 90% of the parents in the state are pretty darn good parents, and 10% might not be. And we're taking away the rights. Currently, we're taking away the rights of the good parents because of the bad. We have reporting requirements for teachers and coaches and stuff to DCYF, and my problem is DCYF was originally put together to be a social services agency, and now they've become a law enforcement agency, and that social services is missing. If for those 10% of the people, if they had the social services, that could help them, then we might get that down to 5%. There's some that aren't able to be helped, I guess. But I know for me, and I don't doubt there isn't anybody here that wouldn't react the same way. When my daughter got into rehab, I just spilled the beans on her a little while ago. When she got into rehab, she was crying, she was embarrassed, and I told her, baby girl, there ain't anything you can do that'll make me stop loving you. I don't think there's any one of us here that wouldn't come out with a statement like that to their kid. And unfortunately, we do have that 10%. Those people need help. But we can't be kicking the 90% of good parents to the curb, and being a hindrance to them as far as raising their child goes. This is why we need this. It's somehow along the line, society has developed, just turned into this mess, and this is one step in correcting it. There's many steps that need to be done, but it's only one step. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Georges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think so. There is a good parent, and then there is a good kids, and then there is also teachers inside the school. But the kids doesn't speak to all the teachers because there is the kids have a three of, maybe there is a French, English teacher or social study teacher or there is a God counseling, but there is a one of them, the student, the kids can go share with. But now we are going to put like a block for the kids to not speak to the teacher or for anyone. But that's why if I say like I'm standing for the teacher, because sometimes there is some parents just like the way they're going to talk to the teacher, it become a problem. But kids in the school, there is a one person he can trust, one of the teacher. He can speak to one person. The kids cannot speak to anyone. You can say I'm a pastor. Yes. Is it all the kids come to all the kids go to church? If it's a parent go to church, the kids go to church. Those kids doesn't even go to church. How are they going to speak to the pastor? You see, is it? I think so. We are putting the kids in a block. We need to looking for solution. I think so for the kids, because this is a problem for the kids.
Representative Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As somebody, I always say we never know until they grow up, but that is in the good parent category. I've never actually needed help to talk to my kids. Maybe at one point when we were in our survival, we had like a family therapist we talked to, but I've never not been able to ask my kids question and have a dialogue with them. Our 90% of parents, if that's the case, in this state, we have over 40% of our community that reports that they have experienced abuse. So I think that's probably a little bit of a different dynamic. And that's who's reporting. But whatever the percentages of good parents, they don't need legislative help to be a good parent. Who we help is people like my late husband, who the kids were terrified to talk to him and who demanded answers from the teachers. And luckily in Colorado at that time, they did not give him the answers. Because they were talking, they were finally starting to talk 3 months after he was taken out of the house about some of the things that I didn't even know about. We can't know everything, but our kids have to feel safe to start having those conversations. There is not one piece of legislation you will put in front of me that's going to dictate how I do or don't parent my kids when I'm a good parent. You build the relationship with your kids. You don't say write it in law so my kids have to talk to me.
Representative Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think we're starting to get a little far afield of what this amendment does. This amendment does two major things. One, it adds doctors and medical care to this bill. It blocks the ability of teenagers to access birth control, amongst other things. And it raises the threshold by which we can get social services involved in cases where we are concerned that there is abuse and neglect. And that is going to harm children. And it is our job at this table to act in the best interest of children in New Hampshire. And these sections, it's on page 5 and on page 6, undermine the very purpose of why we are here. We were so close to a bill that we could agree on, and then we added things that are going to hurt kids and protect abusive parents. And I don't know why we did that, but I will never vote for it, ever. And I don't think anyone should.
Final thought? Okay, we're going to be wrapping it up. Final thought, Representative DeSimone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To give my answer to Representative Petrino's question, when a child goes to a school teacher and reports that his or her parents are abusive, sometimes the school doesn't know about it, but most of the time the school does. It then behooves that teacher to go to the administration and make that report, since they're all mandated reporters, to DCYF or DHHS and report the child abuse. So the child can still go to a teacher and say, my parents are going to harm me. And then it's up to that teacher to say, you know what? I got your back. I'm going to make that call to get you safe. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as far as birth control and other medications, there are genetic reasons why children need to have their parents available. I know of one particular case where a child went and got birth control without the parent's knowledge, and that child disclosed it to the parent, who said, oh my goodness, I hope you didn't take any of that, because that particular medication can cause you serious medical problems. So it's only the parent would know if there would be an allergic reaction or a medical reaction to any kind of medication given to a child without the parental consent, and that's the reason for that. Those are my final thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, but that did not answer my question, but I appreciate the attempt.
The motion before us is Amendment 2025-1832H to Senate Bill 72. Moved by the chair, seconded by the vice chair. A yes vote means you are in favor of this amendment. A no vote means you are not. Would a clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Pearson,
Yes.
Representative DeSimone,
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia,
Yes.
Representative McMahon. Yes. Representative Nelson,
Yes.
Representative Moffett,
Yes.
Representative Love. Yes. Representative Corzine is yes. Representative Markell,
Yes.
Representative Petrino,
I'll vote to protect our children and vote no.
Representative Gregg,
Absolutely not. I will not stand with abusers.
Representative Grund,
No.
Representative Levesque,
It's a hard no for me.
Representative Raymond. No. Representative Georges.
No.
Representative Malone.
No.
The motion passes 9-7. Now the motion is for the bill, Senate Bill 72, as amended by Amendment 1832. This is an OTPA. And the chair looks to Representative DeSimone for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 72.
And is there a second? Representative Corzine. There should be no further discussion because we've just had it. The motion is Senate Bill 72 FN as amended by 2025-1832H. Moved by Representative DeSimone, seconded by Representative Corzine. Would one of the clerks please call the roll?
Chairman Pearson.
Yes.
Representative DeSimone.
Yes.
Representative Harvey Bolia.
Yes.
Representative McMahon. Yes. Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Moffett.
Yes.
Representative Love. Yes. Representative Corzine is yes. Representative Markell.
Yes.
Representative Petrino.
No.
Representative Gregg.
No.
Representative Grund.
No.
Representative Levesque.
No.
Representative Raymond. No. Representative Georges.
No.
Representative Malone.
No.
The bill passes 9-7. I wish to move right into the exec session on the next bill, which is Senate Bill 269, which is removing references to matrimonial age and time waivers in the Vital Records Act. And The chair calls on himself for a motion, and the motion is OTP. You want to do a second?
I'll second.
All right. Sometimes we've seen what on the surface is very simple, but for others, there are triggers. Totally unintended, but they happen. And we've seen that from time to time this session. I wish to thank this committee for being gracious when this occurred on this bill. However, the people who have experienced something triggering also have a responsibility. They need to work on their stuff, and sometimes they need a little bit of time to do it. And then they need to see what that original bill was. And so I'm very glad that time was given before we came to exec this bill so that grace could be given and returned. So with that, I move ought to pass, and the vice chair moves second. Is there any discussion? I will speak to my motion that this is my blurb, the bill was sent to the Senate by the Office of the Secretary of State. It crafts no new policy, but simply brings the language of RSA 5C 41.3 and RSA 5C 42.8 into conformity with other parts of the law. I realize when we had the hearing, we were told exactly that, and we didn't disbelieve it, but some of us had to have a circuitous route to get to receiving that, which included a lengthy document, which I think I sent you, from the Deputy Secretary of State, which made it quite possible for me to hear what had been said last time, but also write the committee report as I just read. This is housekeeping. This is language bringing together. It is not making anything different. It is simply using a common language throughout. Any further discussion? Representative Raymond.
Actually, can I just have the form for the minority report for the prior bill, please? I tried to catch you, but you weren't looking in my direction, and so, thank you.
It's not that I didn't.
Otherwise, I completely agree with everything you just said.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, team. Arguably the team that has the most percentage of bills on, you know what that thing is called. And here we go for the win. The motion is OTP on Senate Bill 269, moved by the chair and seconded by the vice chair. Would the clerk please, or one of the clerks please call the roll? Yes.
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 Representative Borzen is no. Representative Markel?
Yes.
Representative Petrino?
Yes.
Representative Gray?
Yes.
Representative Burton?
Yes.
Representative Levesque?
Yes.
Freeman? Yes. Representative Georgia?
Yes.
Representative Miller?
Yes.
What is the number? 14-1. Oh gosh, here's where I get confused. What do I need to do now?
Is it an event?
I know, it's 14-1.
Would you like it on consent?
It is not an FN. Somebody said over here what?
Over here, the young lady.
Would you like it on consent?
Any objections to consent? Then consent it is. We end with a win. And that is it. We'll be back sometime in the fall for a couple of things. And the subcommittee on family court will meet at some time. So thank you all.
If I can have my caucus members just meet in the side room for like 2 minutes.